In terms of delivering cinematic gut punches and moments of pure shock, the only genre that could compete with horror is the humble war movie. For generations, these films have featured a terrifying array of sequences that have blown viewers to smithereens. I'm Ewan, this is War Culture, and here are 40 of the most shocking and unexpected war movie moments. Irina's Fate, Stalingrad. Perhaps the quintessential anti-war film, 1993 Stalingrad is unashamedly desolating. Following a platoon of German soldiers on the Eastern Front, Joseph Wismeyer's picture captures the notion of war as hell in unflinching clarity. It's an exemplary movie, but an emotionally exhausting experience. And true to form, Stalingrad saves its most unexpectedly devastating gut punch for last. The soldiers form a tentative bond with a woman called Irina, who is a soldier in the Red Army across the course of the film. Stalingrad's conclusion sees the disillusioned group silently trudging through the snow, attempting to escape their hellish environs. They are finally alerted to a sign of human life as a Red Army flare illuminates the winter sky. All initially appears to be well as Irina rushes towards the signal, shouting to her people in her mother tongue. That is, of course, until the young woman is gunned down and instantly killed by a volley of Soviet gunfire. There isn't even time to blink in shock. The ending. The Wall, 2017. War thriller The Wall may have divided critical opinion on the film's release in 2017, but Doug Liman's picture features one of the more deviously nasty twist endings in recent memory. Set during the final stages of the Iraq War, the film centers on an American sniper and his spotter, played by John Cena and Aaron Taylor Johnson respectively. The pair soon find themselves lured into a deadly game of cat and mouse with an Iraqi marksman. Pinned down and unable to move, the duo's only source of cover from the sniper's aim takes the form of the film's crumbling eponymous wall. Cena's staff sergeant duly bites the dust at the enemy combatant's hands, but the movie's conclusion sees his spotter apparently triumph over their tormentor. Taylor Johnson's Sergeant Isaac seemingly guns down the sniper with his final round after a prolonged shooting match between the pair. He then tests the waters by standing up in plain view of his assailant. The shot, though, never comes, indicating that Isaac has indeed dispatched his foe. Of course, that's before Liman whips the rug from right underneath us with the revelation that the sharpshooter is simply lying in wait for more targets. As backup arrives, the enemy sniper pounces and disposes of Isaac and his rescuers in one fell swoop, using his rifle to down the escape helicopter and concluding the film with the wickedest of gut punches. Meet Private Ryan, Saving Private Ryan. Steven Spielberg's epic World War II offering Saving Private Ryan follows a group of soldiers on a mission to locate the eponymous private and bring him home safely after his three brothers are killed in combat. Spielberg's picture is bookended by scenes featuring an old man attending a World War II cemetery in France with his family. The film's beginning immediately segues into the first scene set during the war, depicting the hellish arrival of Tom Hanks' Captain Miller and company on Omaha Beach. Accordingly, the initial assumption is that the old man is an elderly version of Miller himself. A supposition reinforced by his resemblance to Hanks. But in a narrative bombshell as heartrending as it is uplifting, the veteran is later revealed to be none other than Ryan himself, with his facial features in the aftermath of the movie's climactic engagement morphing into that of his older self. Ryan is in fact visiting the grave of his fallen comrade, the aforementioned Miller, who died in battle attempting to carry out his mission. Smith, Schaefer, and Turner's true identities are revealed. Where Eagles Dare. Based on an original screenplay from legendary novelist Alistair MacLean, 1968's Where Eagles Dare is renowned as one of the pulpiest, most fun war films ever conceived. Led by Richard Burton and Clint Eastwood as Major John Smith and Lieutenant Morris Schaefer respectively, and man, what a duo they are, Brian G. Hutton's picture is as renowned for its immortal twist ending as it is for its exemplary overall quality. Where Eagles Dare is initially touted as a joint British-American operation to rescue a US general from a remote castle in the German Alps. As the movie progresses, the rescue mission is unmasked as a ruse. The operation is actually an ingenious cover story to mask the real goal of obtaining vital enemy intelligence. After making a thrilling escape, part of which involves that amazing sequence on the cable cars, Smith reveals the movie's final mind-blowing bombshell as he is debriefed by Patrick Wymark's Colonel Turner aboard a transport plane. Burton's soldier reveals that he and Schaefer actually joined the mission on behalf of MI6 to root out the top German undercover agent operating in Britain. An individual at the intelligence gathered on the mission revealed to be none other than Turner himself. Unsurprisingly, the duplicitous colonel wisely elects to avoid a trial by jumping out of the aircraft to his death. The shock factor of this twist was clearly too much for him to handle. John Wayne actually dies. Sands of Iwo Jima. Across a diverse range of genres and roles, John Wayne's party trick was usually to ride off into the sunset after saving the day. The Duke garnered such a reputation for doing precisely that in one form or another that it usually came as a legitimate shock whenever one of Wayne's characters actually bit the dust on screen. There is perhaps no better example of this than 1949's Sands of Iwo Jima. Alan Dwan's offering is one of the most lauded war films of the time, starring Wayne in the leading role of Sergeant John Stryker. One of Wayne's most iconic characters, Stryker is a hard-as-nails disciplinarian. He's initially despised by his men, but the members of his squad soon come to appreciate his methods amidst the heat of battle. And even if Wayne's cinematic charges had made dying more of a habit, Stryker's formidable aura of toughness means that it still comes as an almighty surprise when he is shown to be just as mortal as anyone else. As the squad enjoy a brief lull in the fighting, John is suddenly shot and killed by a Japanese soldier in a twist for the ages. The fact that it's the seemingly indestructible John Wayne is just the icing on the cake. Gibson is unveiled as a Frenchman. Dunkirk. The chaotic backdrop provided by Christopher Nolan's 2017 take on the Dunkirk evacuation provided the perfect camouflage for one of the director's most cunning narrative curveballs. Nolan has built himself a reputation as a master of the twist, and the legendary filmmaker does not disappoint here. One of his key characters this time around is the subject of the director's latest mind-bending efforts, Aneurin Bernard's initially unassuming Gibson. Fionn Whitehead's Tommy first encounters Gibson burying a dead body, but the curious nature of this visual is lost amidst the turmoil of their surroundings. A dead soldier in this fraught environment is hardly the most surprising sight in the world. However, Gibson's relentless silence becomes increasingly suspicious, prompting Harry Styles' Alex to accuse him of being a German spy and precipitating the movie's most shocking development. Gibson is revealed to be French, and a soldier who attempted to adopt the identity of a British trooper, the man he was seen burying earlier, and deployed to escape Dunkirk before the German vanguard broke through. However, Nolan wasn't quite done there. Gibson also meets a shocking demise almost immediately after being unmasked. Attempting to escape the sinking boat that his group were hiding in, the unfortunate young man drowns after becoming tangled in a chain. Steiner's demise and Churchill's body double. The Eagle has landed. Based on Jack Higgins' novel of the same name, the World War II thriller The Eagle has landed depicts a fictional German plot to kidnap Winston Churchill at the height of the conflict. The 1976 film stars Michael Caine in the leading role of the brooding and highly decorated Colonel Kurt Steiner, the man charged with carrying out this daring plot. The operation appears doomed to fail from the get-go, with high-ranking German officials realistically viewing the endeavor as little more than a meaningless exercise to placate their demented leader's whims. As such, the fact that the mission actually appears to succeed constitutes an almighty twist in itself, with Steiner apparently managing to successfully assassinate the British Prime Minister before being gunned down himself. Remarkably, the shocking nature of the proceedings doesn't let up one bit from there. The dead Churchill is soon revealed to have been an unnervingly similar-looking body double. The real man is safe and sound and on his way to the Tehran conference. The alternate timeline, Inglourious Basterds. The initial goings in the chaotic universe depicted by Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Basterds indicated that the director was always willing to play it somewhat fast and loose with World War II's actual history. However, the extent to which Tarantino was willing to venture away from the realms of reality wasn't fully established until the confirmation that this film depicted an alternate and decidedly embellished historical timeline. And how does he confirm this? By having the bastards massacre the entirety of Nazi high command as they attend the premiere of the propaganda film Nation's Pride. The delightful visual of Adolf Hitler's face being torn to shreds by a hail of MP40 fire even comes around as the result of a slick twist within a twist. Christoph Waltz's Hans Lander merrily sells out his superiors to save his own skin in light of the Axis' impending defeat, despite his reputation as a fanatically loyal and ruthless Nazi. Blake's death, 1917. If you had to pick a main character between the pair of George Mackay's Will Schofield and Dean Charles Chapman's Tom Blake in the early goings of 1917, it's fair to say that the latter seems the more likely of the two. Not only was Blake the more outwardly personable of the two soldiers, but he also possessed an emotional connection to the film's central mission. He and Schofield are charged with carrying a message calling off a scheduled attack that would jeopardize the lives of nearly 2,000 men, among them Blake's elder brother, Joseph. But in a truly devastating development, Blake is mortally wounded by a German pilot after he and Will pull him from the wreckage of his own burning plane. Mackay's private dispatches the wounded aviator, but by then, it's too late. Tom bleeds out soon after, eliciting heartbreaking promises from Schofield that he will write to his mother and complete the mission. Bryony's revelation. Atonement. Based on the Ian McEwan novel of the same name, Joe Wright's Atonement received a tidal wave of positive critical reception back when it released in 2007. The film chronicles a purported crime and its devastating consequences over the course of nearly 60 years, set against the backdrop of World War II. This evocative meditation on remorse and loss centers on Saoirse Ronan's Bryony, who mistakenly accuses her older sister Cecilia's boyfriend Robbie, played by Keira Knightley and James McAvoy respectively, of sexual assault. The innocent Robbie is incarcerated until he is eventually released to fight when the war breaks out. Atonement's twist isn't so much a twist as it is an emotional train wreck. Robbie eventually makes it home via the beaches of Dunkirk to be reunited with Cecilia, eventually culminating in a tearful apology to the pair from Bryony for her harrowing mistake. All's well that ends well, right? Well, wrong. This happy ending is revealed to be a complete fabrication of the guilt-stricken Bryony's mind, adapted into the chapters of an autobiographical novel to atone for her seismic levels of regret. In reality, Robbie died from an infected wound while waiting to be evacuated, and Cecilia met her own demise soon after in the Balam tube station bombing. Good lord. The mine turns out to be a tin can mine. Led by Armie Hammer before his big fall from grace, Mine is a rare blend of genres. A war movie featuring the usual trappings of a psychological thriller. The 2016 outing sees the actor take on the role of US Marine Mike Stevens, a sniper who encounters an unthinkably nightmarish situation following a mission gone wrong. Stevens becomes trapped after stepping on a mine during his exfiltration. One wrong move and the device will blow him to Kingdom Come. An unfortunate prospect when stranded in the middle of nowhere and being hounded by lots of insurgents. Haunted by visions of his terminally ill mother and girlfriend Jenny, Hammer's soldier must endure the physical and psychological torment of this unenviable state of affairs until help arrives. After a gunfight with his pursuers leaves his rescue flare out of reach, the Marine is left with no choice but to finally step off the mine. This development leads to the film gleefully unveiling its closing twist. There is no explosion, no screams, no mess of broken and twisted limbs. The perplexed Stephen digs through the sand to uncover the quote-unquote explosive, only to discover that his captor was actually a small tin can with a toy soldier inside it all along. Whoops. Nobody survives. All quiet on the Western Front. While many viewers may have gotten their first taste of All Quiet on the Western Front through Netflix's 2022 remake, the 1930 iteration provided the original plot twist that nobody saw coming. It's also a way better movie, if you ask me, as it actually gets the whole war fever of the source material instead of just reiterating Saving Private Ryan-esque shock value, but that's by the by. There isn't a single shocking narrative development that stands above the rest within the context of Lewis Mileston's picture. Rather, it's the fact that not one single member of the film's core group of protagonists makes it to the end of proceedings. Introduced to the audience as bright-eyed young men filled with the unshakable optimism of youth and classic jingoism, each main character's death constitutes an emotionally devastating sequence, reaffirming the devastating reality associated with armed conflict. Even the film's focal character, Paul Balmer, is not exempt from this harrowingly true-to-life status quo. Following the demise of his mentor Kat, a smiling Paul is suddenly shot and killed by a sniper as he reaches for a butterfly, a poignant symbol of transformation and hope in the film's final sequence. Hook's redemption, Zulu. Helm's Deep ain't got nothing on these chaps. Chronicling the miraculous defense of Rorke's Drift during the Anglo-Zulu War, 1964 Zulu is an iconic war outing, starring Michael Caine in one of his earliest roles. Based on a remarkable true story, Cy Enfield's film depicts a struggle against seemingly impossible odds. The tale of how 150 British soldiers held off a force of more than 4,000 Zulu warriors. Granted, one side had lots of Martini Henry rifles and the other had spears and shields, but still, those odds aren't exactly what I'd call tasty. And to lend some context to this feat of extraordinary account, 11 men received the Victoria Cross for their exploits in the battle, the most ever awarded for a single action to this day. Among these individuals was one Private Henry Huck, introduced to viewers as a serial malingerer confined to Rorke's Drift's hospital after consistently feigning illness. Described as, quote, a thief, a coward, and an insubordinate barrack room lawyer by his superiors, James Booth's Huck hardly seems the type to throw himself into any undue heroics if there's nothing in it for him. This was actually a really controversial element of the film. The real-life Huck was a model soldier, and there were stories of his relatives walking out of Zulu when they realized how his heroics had been translated to the big screen. Either way, the unmasking of his true character in the film comes as a shocking plot twist in the bloody chaos of the battle that soon ensues. After the Zulus set the hospital on fire, Huck gallantly rallies the patients to repel their attackers. This unlikely hero even manages to get several stricken patients to safety, hacking a hole in the wall to allow them to escape as the hospital collapses in flames. Guess you don't judge a Huck by its cover. It's the only bad pun you're gonna get in this list, I promise. Menelaus bites the dust. Troy. Wolfgang Petersen's 2004 epic historical war offering Troy is loosely based upon Homer's Iliad, with King Menelaus one of the most important characters in the Trojan War's overarching narrative. Husband to the infamous Helen of Troy, Menelaus beseeches the Greek kings to wage war against the Trojans after his wife is stolen away by the young Prince Paris. However, the king of Sparta ultimately gets the last laugh. He's one of the Greeks who eventually stows away in the Trojan horse, victoriously sailing home with his duplicitous wife in tow after the city is sacked. As such, Menelaus' story arc in Petersen's take on events constitutes an almighty plot twist. In Homer's canon, Menelaus challenges Paris to a duel for Helen's return and defeats the prince with ease. Troy mirrors this version of events, but implements a deviation from its source material. The Iliad recounts that Paris was spirited away from the battlefield by the goddess Aphrodite, saving him from death at Menelaus' hands. Unfortunately, there's no such godly intervention to be found in Petersen's film. Paris' brother Hector shockingly slays Menelaus before he can deal the killing blow, doing away with one of Homer's more prominent characters before the film even reaches its halfway point. The Captain's Double Cross, Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World. Hell yeah, now we're talking. Peter Weir's 2003 banger Master and Commander was universally acclaimed for the masterful manner in which the Australian adapted Patrick O'Brien's novels for the silver screen. Helmed by the towering presence of Russell Crowe as Captain Jack Aubrey, Weir's picture is outrageously entertaining, gorgeously shot and performed by the crew and cast. It also has an unexpected plot twist right at the end. The climactic battle between Aubrey's surprise and the French frigate Acheron seemingly sees the enemy captain killed in the fighting. After the French surrender, Jack is gifted his fallen counterpart's sword by the Acheron's doctor, a man named Lavigny. Except all is not as it seems. As the Acheron sails away, poor Bettany Stephen Maturin reveals that Lavigny actually died several months prior, unmasking the quote-unquote doctor as the real French captain. An irritated Aubrey realizes that he has been duped, immediately giving the order to pursue the French ship and for the crew to assume battle stations as the film concludes. Actually, while I'm here, while it was a huge bummer we never got a sequel to Master and Commander, how do you all feel about the announced Chris Hemsworth starring prequel? Personally, I'm always down for more of Captain Jack, but I do wish we got to do more of these in the early 2000s instead. Limbani fails to make it home. The Wild Geese. Helmed by an impressively honking ensemble cast including Roger Moore and Richard Harris, 1978's The Wild Geese follows a group of mercenaries as they attempt to free Jules Limbani, the deposed president of an unnamed African country, before his execution. While the film's ragtag group of soldiers succeeds in liberating Limbani, they are betrayed by their benefactors in short order. As such, Andrew V. McLaughlin's picture saves its devastating coup de grace for the final sequences. A desperate race against time ensues as our protagonists attempt to get an escape plane operational, all while a bloody gunfight breaks out against Limbani's pursuers in the background. In total, only 13 of the original force of 50 men actually make it aboard their plane. In a sickening development too, Limbani is revealed to have caught a bullet during the group's frenzied escape. The stricken president dies soon after the plane touches down in Rhodesia, rendering the entire operation a complete failure and a catastrophic loss of human life. An SS soldier doesn't give Norman's position away. Fury. Following an American tank crew in the final months of World War II, David Ayer's Fury is unflinching in its depiction of war as hell. The 2014 offering is unashamedly nihilistic, a theme that extends from Fury's narrative to its visuals. Soldiers from both sides are reduced to bloody shreds, torn limb from limb by machine gun fire, or mushed into the blood-soaked mud in horrifically graphic fashion from start to finish. Ultimately, even the film's core group of characters, the crew of the titular M4 Sherman, aren't safe from that precedent either. Brad Pitt and company are all duly and bloodily dispatched after the crippled tank is swarmed by an SS battalion. Logan Lerman's Norman Ellison is the only man left standing, or more accurately, left cowering in the mud beneath the vehicle in a desperate attempt to avoid a similar fate. What follows next highlights Ayer's dedication to constructing an atmosphere of merciless hopelessness, underlined by the fact that a simple piece of human goodness constitutes a jarring plot twist in this film. Norman appears to be as good as toast when he is discovered by a Waffen SS soldier peering under the tank, only for the young German to inexplicably spare him by moving on without alerting his comrades. Danilov sacrifices himself. Enemy at the gates. Set at the height of the Battle of Stalingrad, 2001's Enemy at the Gates offers a highly dramatized account of the legendary game of cat and mouse between Soviet sniper Vasily Zaitsev and his Wehrmacht counterpart, Erwin Koenig. Played by Jude Law, Zaitsev's closest friend and confidant is Joseph Fiennes' Commissar Danilov, a relationship that eventually sours over the pair's competing affections for Rachel Weisz's Tanya Chernova. Casting his friendship with Vasily aside over Zaitsev's perceived betrayal, the Commissar even disparages Law's sniper in a letter to his superiors. By the time the film's closing act rolls around, Danilov's character arc from wingman to grade A weasel seems pretty locked in, until Tanya is seemingly killed on her way to the evacuation boats. Danilov's slide into villainous territory is abruptly halted, with the political officer subsequently consumed with guilt over his jealousy of Vasily. With all that being said, few viewers were likely prepared for just how far Fiennes' character was willing to go to redeem himself. In a heartbreaking turn of events, Danilov deliberately exposes himself to Koenig after making his final apologies, tricking the German into shooting him and revealing his position to Vasily so he can finish the job. Maritza is unveiled as a partisan, Force 10 from Navarone. Featuring Harrison Ford and loosely based upon Alistair MacLean's novel of the same name, Force 10 from Navarone is an unlikely sequel that also contains a delightful assortment of plot twists. While the double-crossing nature of one Captain Leskovar constitutes the movie's most obvious example, the reveal that new viewers never really see coming actually occurs amid the movie's first act. The film's core group of saboteurs and commandos is captured by Germans after parachuting into occupied Yugoslavia, an outfit led by the despicable Major Schroeder and his concubine Maritza, played by none other than iconic Bond girl Barbara Bach. On the surface, Maritza appears to be an implacable extension of her Nazi beau, a merciless collaborationist itching to do away with her newly acquired prisoners. However, appearances can be deceiving. After Ford's Colonel Barnsby and Robert Shaw's Major Mallory construct a ruse concerning a fictitious stash of buried penicillin to stall the Germans, Maritza and a group of Schroeder's Nazi cronies escort the soldiers to where the quote-unquote revolutionary medicine is supposedly located. As the pair attempt to lure their captors closer to outpower them, the Germans are suddenly cut down by a hail of machine gun fire. The smoke clears to reveal the shooter as none other than Maritza, unveiling Bach's character as a Yugoslav partisan. This thing being so surprising speaks volumes to the quality of Bach's performance. The American's turn as a baddie is so convincing that her unmasking as an ally is a complete surprise. The U-boat's demise, Das Boot. Few plot twists exemplify the hopeless nature of war better than the devastating conclusion to Wolfgang Petersen's Das Boot. Brilliantly capturing the individualistic aspects of a submarine crew at the height of World War II, the iconic 1981 offering follows U-96, a German submarine mired in the thick of the Battle of the Atlantic. The crew undergo a litany of traumatic flashpoints across the course of the film, from being bombarded with depth charges to narrowly avoiding implosion after the submarine sinks to its rated limit. As such, the desolating turn of events that awaits the film's protagonist upon returning to the supposed safety of La Rochelle comes as a shock to even the most pessimistic of viewers. The U-boat's luck finally runs out in harrowing fashion after U-96 is sunk by Allied fighter planes, a jaw-dropping surprise attack that sees the U-boat's captain and the majority of the crew killed or wounded. It's a hugely massive gut punch after watching the crew for 149 minutes. And really, there are many fine movies concerning submarines, but few that will ever surpass Petersen's inimitable outing. Super 6-1 is down. Black Hawk Down. Ridley Scott's Black Hawk Down arrived like a visceral, high-contrast bolt of lightning when it premiered in 2001, depicting the ill-fated 1993 Battle of Mogadishu, in which US forces attempted to capture two key lieutenants working under Somali dictator Mohammed Farah Aidid. Scott's film rendered modern warfare in stark clarity, taking the lessons Spielberg imparted in Saving Private Ryan, and in doing so, leaving a reminder that the horrors of combat were never old history. Technology had made war more efficient, and in turn, no less deadly. Violence in Black Hawk Down is grimy, bloody, and unceasingly shocking, but in a way, the film is at its most effective when it lingers on moments of quiet. Imagery of US Army Rangers being blown in half or getting picked off a Humvee-mounted 50 cal is ruthless, but we're left with such little time to process the machinery of the terror unfolding that those moments of decompression soon take on greater significance. Bullet casings, glass, and blood stain the interior of a Humvee. Rangers stand desolate in a dilapidated building, night falling like a shroud of uncertainty. All of it filtered via satellite for the top brass to stare at in disbelief. It is that very kind of satellite imagery that affords Black Hawk Down its most iconic image. Super 6-1 is the first Black Hawk helicopter that gets shot down by an RPG, and it ends up crash landing at a crossroads. We're treated to a bird's eye view of the chopper's last moments, as its rotor slowly comes to a halt and the last remnants of dust are kicked into the air, before the filter changes to surveillance footage beamed through to the US base in Mogadishu's airport. Distant and yet so real. This is modern warfare. Melish's death. Saving Private Ryan. Although not the first film to depict the Second World War in stark, brutal terms, Saving Private Ryan was certainly one of the first to frame it in such a frenetic, uncompromising way, starting with its acclaimed depiction of the landings on Omaha Beach. And as effective as the film's opening sequence is, arguably its most affecting death comes way later, as the remaining troops in the unit of Tom Hanks' Captain Miller bunker down with the Ryan they were looking for and attempt to hold off a Nazi advance. It's another immaculately arranged action sequence, yet again punctuated by sudden, unforgiving death. But it also delivers Saving Private Ryan's most harrowing moment, when Adam Goldberg's Melish is overpowered by an SS soldier and stabbed to death. Goldberg is hauntingly believable as Melish desperately pleads for his life, with the whole nauseating affair being capped off by a distraught Corporal Upham powerlessly watching on from the side. I'm afraid we can't accept your surrender. A Bridge Too Far. Taking on the role of real-life Lieutenant Colonel John Frost, who commanded British forces during the bloody Battle of Arnhem, Anthony Hopkins in A Bridge Too Far embodies all the classic understatement and caustic wit that came to define the World War II era Tommy in popular memory. He's accompanied for much of the film by Christopher Good's Harry Carlyle, an umbrella-wielding soldier based on the real-life Digby Tate and Warder, with the duo marshalling their troops against an increasingly fierce Nazi counterattack. Alas, as in real life, Frost's forces are cut off at Arnhem and suffer heavy losses accordingly. This eventually culminates in a reluctant surrender, but not before Frost relays one of the most defiant and humorous retorts to his Axis opponents, delivered with aplomb by Good's Carlyle. Outgunned, out of time, and implored to surrender by an opposing German soldier, Frost simply says to Carlyle that he should tell the bargaining Nazi to go to hell. Carlyle thusly obliges, cheekily responding by saying, quote, "We don't have the proper facilities to take you all prisoner." It's a brilliant exchange, and better still is that it actually happened during the real-life Battle of Arnhem. The Huron Ambush, the last of the Mohicans. While to call The Last of the Mohicans a war film would be to limit the scope of its focus, it's a great big romantic drama too, conflict does loom large over the story, as Great Britain and its colonies battle France for control over its North American territories during the 7 Years' War. The fighting saw both colonial powers forge alliances with different Native American tribes, and it is this particular aspect of the conflict that director Michael Mann renders most impressively. Focusing on a British unit as they escort an officer's daughters to a nearby fort, accompanied by Daniel Day-Lewis's Hawkeye, Mann slowly and then suddenly introduces a new threat waiting in the trees, a group of French-allied Huron who proceed to ambush the group in brutal fashion. The sequence is beautifully and authentically arranged by Mann, with the Huron picking off soldiers one by one and stoking confusion within the British ranks. This leads to a full-on ambush, captured with an iconic wide shot showing muskets firing on each side of the column. Hiltz's motorcycle getaway, The Great Escape. There is no more iconic a POW war movie than John Sturges' The Great Escape. Boasting one of the most legendary ensemble casts of all time, bringing together Steve McQueen, Charles Bronson, James Garner, and Richard Attenborough to name just a few, The Great Escape retold the daring Allied escape attempt from the Stalag Luft III prisoner of war camp in 1944. While much of the story was true, there were some pretty significant embellishments, most famously the motorcycle chase depicted in the film, which saw McQueen's Virgil Hiltz attempt to outrun his Nazi pursuers on a Triumph trophy. And even though it wasn't based in reality, Hiltz's escape attempt, requested to be done via motorcycle by McQueen, is one of the most iconic and kinetic sequences in movie history, and is a key reason why The Great Escape has been immortalized in quite the way it has. Private Pyle self-destructs. Full Metal Jacket. Stanley Kubrick was a master satirist. Between Dr. Strangelove and Full Metal Jacket, the director made acute incisions into the ludicrous nature of Cold War confrontation and the debilitating process of armed conflict. Strangelove skews more towards explicit comedy, sure, but Full Metal Jacket isn't so different, achieving similar results through stark depictions of combat that, in a way, highlight the absurd nature of war, particularly the Vietnam War as a concept. Whereas Strangelove was mostly concerned with the rank absurdity of nuclear Armageddon, Full Metal Jacket is all about the dehumanizing nature of warfare and the mental trauma nations impose in transforming men into killers, a process best exemplified by Vincent D'Onofrio's Private Pyle. Pyle enters Full Metal Jacket fairly anonymously, but is soon picked on by Gunnery Sergeant Hartman as his special project, a person to destroy in order to make a Marine who is capable of living and killing in Vietnam. There are multiple horrifying moments in Pyle's decline, but the moment that it is crystallized fully is undoubtedly Full Metal Jacket's most enduring legacy. D'Onofrio wears the Kubrick stare so well as a man who may as well be nothing more than a gun, killing Hartman and then himself after enduring a process few films have interrogated in such scathing fashion. What have I done? The Bridge on the River Kwai. The first of two David Lean films to appear on this list, no prizes for guessing what the other is, 1957's The Bridge on the River Kwai is a true Shakespearean effort, as much a look into regimented obsession as it is a cracking adventure film. Set in the Second World War and focusing on an Allied operation to halt the construction of a Japanese rail bridge in Burma, construction of which has been led by Allied prisoners of war, The Bridge on the River Kwai featured a tremendous cast including William Holden, Jack Hawkins, and Sir Alec Guinness. Guinness won an Oscar for his portrayal of the delusional Colonel Nicholson, a British officer determined to exemplify the Army's professional reputation and fighting spirit, even if that means colluding with their Japanese captors. An Allied commando unit made up of British and American personnel is thusly dispatched to halt the bridge's construction, inevitably bringing them into conflict with Nicholson, who only realizes his mistake at the very end. The moment where Nicholson snaps out of his delusions makes one of the best scenes in Lean's filmography, and in Guinness's career as an actor. Almost in a flash, as he reacts with protest to his comrades attempting to destroy the bridge, the scale of what has transpired drowns Nicholson in regret. What have I done? A crack of gunfire, a twisted monument destroyed by its mournful creator. Truly masterful filmmaking. Reaching for the Heavens, Platoon. Drawing from his own experiences as a soldier in Vietnam, Oliver Stone yields one of the most powerful anti-war films of all time in Platoon. It is perhaps ironic, then, that in its attempts to demystify Vietnam, Platoon also produced one of the most operatic examples in the war movie genre. A sequence that, while heartbreaking in context, has been codified into popular culture through parody: the death of Willem Dafoe's Sergeant Elias. Betrayed by Tom Berenger's Barnes and harried by pursuing NVA soldiers, Elias emerges from the jungle canopy and is shot multiple times, throwing his hands up to the heavens before dying, all while Adagio for strings swells. Even with the years of parody it's faced, it's still a brilliant scene. A crushing moment made ever more devastating for the fact it feels like Elias is pleading with the heavens for an answer he'll never get. Why? The Attack on Aqaba, Lawrence of Arabia. One of the greatest, biggest films ever made, David Lean's Lawrence of Arabia almost has too many memorable scenes to list off. It's a legendary film filled with legendary moments, anchored by a powerhouse performance from Peter O'Toole, who is joined by the likes of other inimitable talents like Alec Guinness, Omar Sharif, and Anthony Quinn. It is the complete film, a tour de force of exemplary character work, performance, and technicality. But if any one scene were to exemplify all these feats together, then it would have to be the Attack on Aqaba. Here, Lean draws all of his strengths together for one undying moment of pure spectacle. Starting with a ringing bell and a shot of Turkish positions overlooking the desert, Lean then cuts to a shot of Lawrence's forces bearing down on the city like a force of nature. The use of perspective here is key. The establishing shot conveys the scale and fear-inducing threat posed by Lawrence, while repeated close-ups demonstrate the loud, galloping chaos within the wave's ranks. Lean then switches perspective again to a wide panning shot fixed above the Ottoman positions, using distance to fully capture the unrelenting momentum of Lawrence's advance. The shot finally dwells on one of the guns pointed towards the sea, intimating the scale of Lawrence's achievements and the odds that have been overcome. The afterlife revealed, a matter of life and death. Is it controversial to call A Matter of Life and Death a war film? It's certainly not one in the traditional sense, and could arguably be more accurately categorized as a fantasy romance. Equally though, war looms so large over Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger's masterpiece that it feels wrong to ignore it in a list like this. A remarkable effort from the two filmmakers, 1946's A Matter of Life and Death is both an expressionistic reckoning with the unfathomable scale of loss incurred throughout the Second World War, as well as a rousing, uplifting rallying cry for the joy of living. The film focuses on the love affair between a British bomber pilot who was fated to die and an American radio operator who stays with him as he goes down over the channel. The pilot, Peter Carter, played by a career-best David Niven, wakes up the next day alive and well on an English beach, and promptly begins a romance with the radio operator June, Kim Hunter, who stayed with him in his final moments. The problem is, Niven's pilot was meant to die the night of that raid, but his conductor, a sort of angel manifested here as an 18th century French aristocrat, couldn't find him over the English Channel's fog. He thus has to plead his case to the afterlife, depicted here entirely in black and white compared to the technicolor vibrancy of Earth, that he should live. At the same time, Peter is faced with a stark medical diagnosis, lending weight to the interpretation that his battle with the other side is purely hallucinatory and perhaps a means of processing his survivor's guilt. Most scenes in A Matter of Life and Death leave a profound impression, but none more so than the introduction of the afterlife in the opening act. Here, Powell and Pressburger reveal a tranquil, epic bureaucracy, a pristine visual creation in which souls ascend stairways and angels peer into the void of humanity below. It's the film's indelible visual hallmark, and a moving confrontation with one of our darkest hours.
Shia LaBeouf sliced his own face on the set of Fury. A savage depiction of tank warfare set against the backdrop of World War II's Endgame, Fury is a masterful outing from David Ayer, an unflinching rendition of war's brutality and the indelible bonds formed between men during combat. The 2014 film is one heck of a visceral experience and a notable genre entry from the 2010s. And it also had some pretty weird stuff happening on set. No stranger to legal issues and controversies in general, Fury cast member Shia LaBeouf is not renowned for being the most level-headed individual in the world. While LaBeouf's style of method acting is well known at this point, the actor took his volatile antics to disturbing new levels in his efforts to portray tank gunner Boyd Bible Swan in Ayer's film. In addition to refusing to shower and having a tooth pulled to play the character, LaBeouf left his castmates aghast by issuing prosthetic scars and slicing his own face with a knife to give his character a convincing injury. The actor continued to reopen the wound throughout filming, horrifying everyone around him to such an extent that production allegedly arranged for him to stay in separate accommodation for the remainder of the film's shoot. Yeah. Anyway, Christopher Nolan used footage from a destroyed IMAX camera during production on Dunkirk. A stirring take on the real-life 1940 evacuation of Allied troops from the film's titular French beachhead, 2017's Dunkirk stands as one of Christopher Nolan's best ever outings, and for what it's worth, is my personal favorite film from the director, who has long been one of the biggest champions of the IMAX format. In addition to being one of cinema's most celebrated and influential working directors though, Nolan has an unfortunate reputation for destroying said IMAX cameras, a trend that did not change with Dunkirk. Having already wrecked two hugely expensive cameras while filming the Dark Knight trilogy, Nolan proceeded to strap his latest IMAX victim to a plane and crashed it into the sea. Now, unsurprisingly, the plane soon plunged to the channel floor, causing the camera to fill with water, which, as you may have guessed, is a big no-no. While Nolan's hopes for an incredible shot seemed to have sunk, the recording was remarkably saved using an old-fashioned film technique. The footage was ultimately used in the final cut, but the camera, well, they weren't so lucky, taking Nolan's tally of destroyed IMAX cameras to 3. So, watch out there, IMAX cameras, you could be next. The production of Waterloo featured a staggering number of extras. An epic historical war movie focused on the 1815 Battle of Waterloo, 1970s Waterloo stars Rod Steiger and Christopher Plummer as Napoleon Bonaparte and the Duke of Wellington respectively. The film itself is known for its authentic battle sequences without the use of special effects, which it achieved in part because it was co-financed by the Soviet Union in the midst of the Cold War. In addition to lavishing eye-watering amounts of money on the production, the Soviets went to remarkable lengths to produce a realistic portrayal of the battle. In addition to calling up 17,000 Soviet army soldiers to play the extras, they bulldozed 2 hills, built 5 miles of road, and laid more than 6 miles of underground irrigation piping to produce the mud required for an authentic depiction of the actual battle. They even reconstructed 4 historical buildings to lend further levels of legitimacy to the proceedings, which, yeah, that's really going all out. It's a pretty staggering achievement, and if you watch Waterloo today, you'll probably agree that it's one of the select few movies to really illustrate the scale of one of history's biggest ever battles. Give it a try if you haven't already, it's a great film. Battle of Britain reunited 2 opposing pilots. A 1969 production from Guy Hamilton, Battle of Britain chronicles the battle for aerial supremacy between the RAF and the Luftwaffe as the Nazis geared up for a potential invasion of the British mainland in 1940. Boasting an international ensemble cast including Michael Caine and Laurence Olivier, the film is renowned for its sheer epic scale. Requisitioning more than 100 period aircraft during filming, Battle of Britain unofficially owned the 35th largest air force in the world at the time of its production. Kind of a disappointment they didn't invade anyone in that time with that kind of arsenal, but oh well. The film also drew on the experiences of real-life combatants who fought during the Battle of Britain, employing them as consultants during production. Among others, these veterans included Polish flying ace Bolesław Drabinski and Luftwaffe General Adolf Garland. While the two former foes found themselves working on the same movie, they had actually met during the war. And yeah, as you can imagine, this was allegedly not a friendly encounter. The two pilots met in the skies during a vicious aerial dogfight in 1941. Drabinski came out on top in their encounter, heavily damaging Garland's plane and forcing the German fighter into a crash landing. Fast forward 28 years later, the two men remarkably found themselves face to face once again. Bradley Cooper wore Chris Kyle's shoes while filming American Sniper. While any good actor must metaphorically step into the shoes of the character they're playing, Bradley Cooper took this sentiment to a weird new level during the production of American Sniper. A dramatized biopic from legendary filmmaker Clint Eastwood, the 2014 war film chronicles the life story of Chris Kyle, a US Navy SEAL sniper who was credited with more than 150 kills during the Iraq War. Packing on muscle and affecting a Texan accent to lend legitimacy to his portrayal of his formidable charge, Cooper left no stone unturned in bringing his depiction to life. The actor revealed in an interview that he even made the bizarre choice to wear the exact shoes used by Kyle across 4 tours of Iraq during filming. Cooper even continued to don the marksman's footwear long after production on the movie had wrapped. The actor mused that his decision to continue wearing Kyle's shoes was likely due to his deep emotional connection to the film's eponymous character, sadly remarking, quote, "I don't want to let go, maybe." The falls in Lone Survivor didn't use CGI. Lone Survivor chronicles the true story of its titular character, Marcus Luttrell, the sole member of an elite Navy SEAL team left standing after a disastrous reconnaissance mission during the war in Afghanistan. Chief amongst the brutality at the heart of Peter Berg's film is the realism of its falling sequences. The movie depicts multiple instances where the SEALs tumble down the unforgiving slopes of a rocky mountainside in an attempt to evade their Taliban pursuers, capturing every bone-crunching moment of impact in sickening fashion. But the truly insane thing about these sequences, they weren't choreographed and used no wires. In an effort to cultivate a high level of authenticity, the stunt actors were instructed to, quite literally, fall 20 feet down an array of cliff faces. These pieces of footage would later be edited together to appear as one continuous descent. And yeah, unsurprisingly, multiple stunt performers were injured during production as the falls were way too difficult to control in a safe manner. The cast of Platoon got high to get into character. Based on the director's real-life experiences of the Vietnam War, Oliver Stone's Platoon is one of the war genre's most seminal offerings. The 1986 Academy Award-winning film depicts the battle for man's soul set against the visceral backdrop of the Vietnam War, featuring a trio of powerhouse performances from Charlie Sheen, Willem Dafoe, and Tom Berenger. A remarkable fact that viewers likely don't know about Stone's masterful war routing, though, is that during a psychedelic sequence in the film where the platoon gets inebriated on drugs and alcohol in the aptly dubbed underworld, the cast is just as stoned as they look. Willem Dafoe disclosed in a later interview that several of the cast members decided to get into character for the trippy sequence by smoking copious amounts of marijuana beforehand, which, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You just look at those guys, they're just having a great time. While the iconic moment has been a immortalized forever on the silver screen and lend Stone's film a trademark level of authenticity, this decision didn't actually end well in practice. Defoe revealed that by the time that production had finished shooting the scene, the groggy actors had sobered up and were far too befuddled to be of any real use. Val Kilmer accidentally got Matthew Modine cast in Full Metal Jacket. A nihilistic masterpiece from Stanley Kubrick, 1987's Full Metal Jacket isn't just one of the finest genre offerings from the 1980s, it's also one of the greatest war movies ever conceived. The film follows the central character, Private J.T. Joker Davis, from his traumatic experiences at Marine boot camp to the combat zones of Vietnam, commenting on the disastrous conflict specifically and the ridiculousness that is training a man to take another man's life. American actor Matthew Modine plays Joker in Kubrick's film, but this very nearly wasn't the case. The Married to the Mob actor credits Val Kilmer with accidentally landing him the role through an unlikely series of events. Modine had never even met Kilmer until he ran into the actor at an LA diner, where the Top Gun star proceeded to mean mug and curse quietly at him from across the tables. It turns out that Kilmer was actually up for the lead role in Full Metal Jacket and had been misinformed that Modine had pipped him to the gig. In reality, the Vision Quest star hadn't even heard of the project in question. After reassuring his peer that, hey, everything's okay, I'm not even doing the movie, Modine then swiftly found a payphone to call his agent about auditioning for the mysterious new film from Kubrick. The rest, as they say, is history. 13 different horses were used in bringing Joey to life in War Horse. Based on Michael Morpurgo's 1982 novel of the same name, 2011's critically acclaimed outing War Horse captures a devastating snapshot of the First World War. The Academy Award-nominated film plays out through the eyes of Joey, a Bay Irish hunter who finds himself thrust to the forefront of the fighting after being bought by the British Army and separated from his beloved rider Albert. In addition to the 300 horses used during production, Steven Spielberg used no fewer than 13 different steeds to bring his version of Morpurgo's equine character to life. While the animals are indistinguishable from another on screen, 8 separate horses were tasked with playing the adult version of Joey. An additional 4 colts and a foal were used to portray the stallion during his adolescence in the Devon countryside. While all of this may seem slightly excessive to play one horse, the wide array of animals used in filming all brought unique traits to the table. Most notably, Spielberg used slightly shorter horses in the sequences where their riders had to tumble off them, in order to reduce the risk of injury for the stunt performers. Eli Roth and Omar Doom were nearly incinerated on the set of Inglourious Basterds. Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Basterds is a showcase of the director's unique style of filmmaking, a chaotic genre subversion that is contentiously his finest offering since Pulp Fiction. Featuring the trademark Tarantino cocktail of homage, razor-sharp dialogue, and shockingly graphic violence, the 2009 picture is arguably the most enduring and celebrated war film this side of 2000. Remarkably though, Tarantino's acclaimed movie could have ended in tragedy following an insane incident on set. Eli Roth revealed that the temperature of the flames used in the infernal cinema sequence was grossly underestimated during shooting. While it was only projected to reach 400 degrees Celsius, the fire actually clocked in at around 1200 degrees Celsius. Now, unsurprisingly, given that temperature, Roth and his scene partner Omar Doom were nearly quote-unquote incinerated in the raging inferno. The flames burned so hot that they melted the steel cables holding the cinema's swastika. The moment in the film where the Nazi symbol falls wasn't actually scripted, that just happened. The fire department informed the film's cast and crew that had the blaze continued for another 15 seconds, the stage would have likely collapsed and killed everyone working on the iconic scene. Wow.